50 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Finance, pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the committee's motion adopted on Tuesday, April 27th. The committee is meeting to study the subject matter of Bill C-30, an act to implement certain provisions of the budget tabled in Parliament on April 19th of this year, and other measures. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format, and most people are on remotely using the Zoom application. The proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website, and so that witnesses are aware, the webcast will always show the person speaking rather than the entirety of the committee. With that, before I go to witnesses, I should mention there is, if everybody shows up, 7 witnesses on this panel, which is a little unusual, but one called in and seen the need, so we just put them on this morning to make the 7, but we have a 2-hour panel, so we should be okay for time. So with that, we will start with the Tourism Industry Alliance of Quebec. Mr. Paquette, Senior Director, Public and Governmental Affairs, and Mr. Ryan, Chairman of the Board and owner of Ski Sutton. Welcome to you both. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Mesdames et messieurs les députés.
Ladies and gentlemen, members of Parliament and members of the Standing Committee on Finance, I'd like to thank you for this invitation. And I'm accompanied by Mr. Jean-Michel Ryan, Chairman of the Board of the Alliance de l'Industrie Touristique du Québec and owner of Ski Sutton. The announcements for the tourism sector in the 2021 federal budget were well received overall, but with a number of reservations. Indeed, one cannot deny that there were significant sums earmarked specifically for Destination Canada for tourism projects by way of regional agencies, as well as for festivals and events that will now be able to continue to play a predominant economic role in urban centres as well as in the regions throughout Canada. However, we believe that all the efforts made to support the industry since the beginning of the pandemic will fail to achieve the target of keeping key businesses afloat if support drops off in July and is gone for good before the borders reopen. Canada's emergency wage subsidy and Canada's emergency rent subsidy have quite literally been lifelines for tourism businesses in Canada. Given the impacts of the third wave of the pandemic, the absence of a plan to reopen borders, and the ambiguity surrounding congregating and travel restrictions, tourism businesses remain at risk of relying solely on local customers for the upcoming summer season, significantly decreasing their revenues for a second consecutive summer. Now, already forced to overextend themselves to keep their heads above water and stuck with little or no cash flow, the summer window of only a few weeks will not be enough to build up the vital cash flow to get through the winter. How will CEWS and CERS be able to support these seasonal businesses if the 2021 budget sees their scope reduced as early as July and appears in the fall when it will be needed most? Wouldn't it be more appropriate to extend those subsidies until they are, for the time they're needed, since they become inapplicable anyway as soon as revenues return to normal? The federal government has been there since the beginning of the crisis to support Canadian businesses. The support provided has been beneficial, but it remains as essential as ever. We are calling for existing programs to be maintained for the unique needs of hard-hit tourism businesses. First, the CEWS and CERS must be extended as long as necessary for the tourism sector. The same scope and parameters must be maintained and include containment measures for the hardest-hit businesses. We believe that keeping these programs under the same parameters and exclusively for the tourism business is a low-risk venture for the government. Indeed, over 95% of the economy has recovered and only the hardest-hit sectors are eligible for these programs. To further mitigate the risk to the government, we further propose increasing the eligibility threshold based on lost revenue. This threshold could be reinstated at 30% as it was when it was first implemented. Second, we propose the adoption of an exit strategy for these programs based on a plan to reopen the borders. Tourism will gradually come back to life as soon as there is an announcement about reopening the borders. However, some preparation time will be required and necessary between border reopening and the gradual return of tourists, business conventions, cruises, international events, etc. And as soon as the borders are reopened, support measures will therefore remain essential and will need to be available to ensure a transition period is successful, which will provide the predictability necessary for a smooth resumption of activities. Thank you for your attention, and Mr. Ryan and I will be available to respond to your questions. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr. Pickett. Turning then to Mr. Van Gorder isn't here yet, is he, clerk? Okay. Then we'll go to the Canadian Business Aviation Association. Mr. Norieko, President and CEO.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the invitation to appear before you today to discuss the implications of Bill C-30 on Canada's $12.1 billion business aviation sector. While this is our first appearance before the Finance Committee, the Canadian Business Aviation Association has been representing this sector for a long time. In fact, this is our 60th anniversary. Today, we represent over 400 members across the country, including corporate flight departments, flight management companies, and entrepreneurs who use aircraft to conduct and grow their business. I would like to share a few facts about business aviation and how it contributes to Canada's social and economic well-being. Despite the myth that business aviation is used exclusively by the 1%, the reality is that our sector is essential to a wide range of individuals, from business suits to construction boots. The reality is that business aviation is a significant driver of economic growth and jobs across Canada, and can be an anchor in our economic recovery. Given Canada's vast size, complex geography, and small population, aircraft have been a niche tool to deliver personnel, food and supplies, equipment, and other essential services to communities of all sizes, many of which have only the most basic airstrip for landing and taking off. Business aviation employs a wide variety of aircraft, from 4-seat propeller-driven aircraft to long-range Canadian-made Bombardier Global 7500s, as well as Boeing 737s. These time machines are used to serve our communities, get workers to remote job sites, and ensure that people can travel by air safely, efficiently, and with all health protocols firmly in place. Today, with Canada's major carriers having cancelled flights to dozens of Canadian communities, business aviation has become even more important, delivering cargo, personnel, and supplies, and ensuring that commerce and trade can continue to support local jobs and businesses. Our sector, which represents over 50,000 Canadian jobs in highly skilled and well-paying professions, gives Canada's entrepreneurs and corporations a much-needed competitive advantage. Moreover, supporting the use of these aircraft also supports Canadian aviation research, development, and manufacturing giants such as Bombardier, CAE, Pratt & Whitney Canada, de Havilland, and Diamond Aircraft, to name just a few. While there are many aspects of Bill C-30 we'd like to address, the chief among these is the luxury tax on private aircraft. The first critical point you need to know is that very few aircraft fall into the personal luxury category. They are nothing like yachts or high-end cars. They are not a lifestyle choice, but rather a safe, reliable, and efficient mode of transportation. The imposition of such a tax on aircraft used for business purposes will have a number of downstream negative implications for safety, sustainability, and for the people, businesses, and communities that rely on our aircraft. With the cost of a new tax to consider, operators will be incented to hold on to aircraft that are older and less sustainable. This would be unfortunate, as business aircraft are the most technologically advanced and sustainable aircraft in production, and this would add to Canada's overall effort to reduce our carbon footprint. Moreover, this tax would have the perverse effect of incentivizing operators to purchase and register aircraft in other countries. Dampening demand for new made-in-Canada aircraft sales has an implication also for Canada's aviation talent pipeline, as you'll hear from my colleague from the Canadian Owners and Pilots Association. The negative impacts will also be felt by non-aviation Canadian businesses that rely on aircraft as a business tool, all the way from construction and mining to the C-suite of Canadian corporations. It is our view that any benefits in imposing this tax are far outweighed by the costs. Compared with other items the luxury tax will apply to, the revenue brought in by aircraft is projected to be limited. According to the Parliamentary Budget Office, the totality of this tax on vehicles, yachts, and aircraft will generate $150 million per year. The bulk of that, 70%, is anticipated to come from vehicle sales, and the remainder from boats and aircraft. Therefore, we're looking at tax revenues from the sale of aircraft of less than $15 million per year. Moreover, this tax is unfair and unsupportable as Canadian taxes such as GST and applicable PST are already applied to the purchase of aircraft, while the personal use of an aircraft is already recognized as a non-deductible taxable benefit to the individual. As well, the Income Tax Act does not specify or limit the type or size of aircraft. An airplane of any size can be used for business purposes. The fact the Income Tax Act makes no distinction on the type of aircraft that can be used for business purposes directly contradicts the budget's definition of personal. Our time today is limited, so we won't have the opportunity to detail the many ways that government and the business aviation community can work together to build back Canada's economy. I hope to share some of these ideas with you when we get into the question and answer period. Thank you again for the opportunity to appear before you, and I welcome your questions.
Thank you very much for appearing on fairly short notice. Turning then to the Canadian Owners and Pilots Association, Mr. Gervais, President and CEO. Mr. Gervais.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, sorry, Ms. Gervais.
That's quite all right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of Parliament. On behalf of the Canadian Owners and Pilots Association, COPA, I thank you for the opportunity to appear before the committee today. We are very concerned with the proposed provision of a luxury tax on new aircraft in Bill C-30. The equivalency placed on a $100,000 car to an aircraft of the same value as being a luxury is flawed. While there are hundreds of conventional and hybrid green automotive brands selling below that threshold, there are virtually no available new aircraft or helicopters. There is an abundance of new boats that can be purchased for less than $250,000. A basic single-engine aircraft used for flight training sells today for $500,000. The threshold placed on new personal aircraft is a highly unrealistic one. Thinking that only the wealthy own private aircraft in Canada is misrepresentative. Among the Canadians who own personal aircraft are medical professionals who travel to remote and northern communities not serviced by commercial charter operators to service and treat their patients. Small business owners use their personal aircraft in locations that are also not accessible to mainstream operators, ensuring their goods and services are available to all Canadians. Farmers who depend on their crop dusting aircraft as a tool to ensure the successful production of their crops. Personal aircraft are used to transport food, clothing, and other essential items to smaller communities hit hard by major storms or events like COVID-19, and flight training schools. Budget 2021 proposes that the tax apply to all new aircraft suitable for personal use, and that as a general rule, large aircraft typically used in commercial activities, such as those having a certified maximum carrying capacity of more than 39 passengers, be excluded from the base. These are medium and large aircraft classification, and therefore it implies that all small aircraft would be taxed. Aircraft in Canada are registered with Transport Canada as either private or commercial, regardless of classification. Therefore, the tax would apply to all small private or commercial aircraft. So then who own these aircraft? In 2021, a little over 100 new aircraft were registered as private and 25 registered as commercial. Of the private, 50% were registered to an individual and the balance are registered to a business, the same small businesses that have been pushed to the brink and beyond, such as farmers for crop dusting and flight training schools. And of the small commercial aircraft, 63% are crop dusters, 12% are flight training aircraft used for the training of the next generation of airline pilots, and 25% are air charters used for cargo, bringing medical supplies, food, and essential goods to remote and northern regions of Canada. The question then is, who will truly be impacted by this new luxury tax? It'll be the air operator who serves Canada's remote and northern regions and contribute to the travel and tourism industry, one of the hardest hit industries due to COVID, flight training schools, frontline workers accessing remote communities, aircraft manufacturers based in Canada, and farmers. Operators who purchase new aircraft and pay the tax will pass that cost on to the customer. Flight training schools will charge more for flight training. Farmers will have to charge more for their crops. In the end, it isn't the so-called wealthy Canadian paying, but the middle to lower class consumer that will be paying the price for the tax. This new tax may also have environmental and safety impacts by discouraging the purchase of new aircraft with lower operating costs and greener technology. The more onerous the cost of ownership becomes, the less pilots will fly, thus affecting the essential business that our aerodromes and local communities rely on. Our vulnerable airport system has already been experiencing difficulties, especially this past year. The thousands of aerodromes in Canada, many located in remote communities, depend on general aviation. Based on an economic impact study of general aviation in Canada in 2017, this sector contributes $9.3 billion in economic output nationally and directly accounts for almost 36,000 full-time jobs in communities across the country. The report highlights the benefits that general aviation operations bring to communities and to the Canadian economy. Penalizing this industry with an arbitrary tax will harm the Canadian economy as a whole. The vast majority that own these new aircraft are not the most affluent Canadians and will mostly penalize the agricultural industry, educational institutes, remote communities, and aircraft manufacturers in Canada. COPA is recommending that the Canadian government reevaluate its criteria of its proposed new luxury tax and exclude all new aircraft typically suited for personal use from its proposal. Thank you again for the opportunity to voice our concerns, and we remain available to provide additional feedback.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gervais. Turning then to Critical Drugs Coalition, Dr. Ahmed.
Thank you for having me. So, dear honorable members, in the context of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Finance's ongoing deliberations on the budget and the COVID-19 pandemic, and on behalf of the Critical Drugs Coalition, which is a nonpartisan grassroots coalition of frontline physicians, pharmacists, and academics, I'm speaking to provide recommendations for how the federal government can improve the resilience and security of Canada's drug supply chain. So to start off, I'd like to declare that I, along with the coalition, have no conflicts of interest, financial or otherwise. I'm a lecturer with the University of Toronto's Department of Family and Community Medicine. I'm also a rural physician, and I work in rural and remote settings all across Northern Ontario for remote Indigenous communities, such as Moose Factory, to small but very busy towns such as Kenora, where I join you from today. And my interest in drug shortages stems from the beginning of the pandemic, when my colleagues and I were actually asked to start rationing and conserving critical anesthetics, such as ketamine, propofol, and fentanyl. These anesthetics are not just needed to put critically ill patients on ventilators, but also to keep them on it. And they're not just needed for COVID-19 patients, but also for other critically ill patients we see in ERs, ICUs, and operating rooms. Their shortages have significant downstream consequences. And, we are used to working with scarce resources in rural settings, but I was quite surprised to hear from colleagues working in the busier downtown hospitals where I trained that they were also experiencing serious shortages of these critical drugs. In fact, at the peak of the shortages in May 2020, only 3% of Canadian pharmacists had received their full shipment of drug orders. And so over the past year, we've sought to understand the causes of these drug shortages. The causes do mirror the causes of the other shortages we saw for PPE and for vaccines. In terms of production, the fragile global production system, mostly based in India and China, buckled under the pandemic, and we've had very little domestic capacity to produce injectable critical drugs, such as the ketamine and the propofol that I mentioned above. In fact, in Canada, we only have one plant in Quebec that makes a very limited selection of injectable drugs. And so we issued a public open letter to the Prime Minister's office on August 13th, 2020. It was supported and signed by many national bodies such as the Canadian Medical Association, the Canadian Association of Emergency Physicians, Ontario Medical Association, and our asks were quite clear and included a pan-Canadian critical medications list, which the government commits to ensuring are always in stock, public support for a generic critical drugs manufacturer, and greater transparency and communication around the critical drug supply. On April the 6th, 2021, we heard from Health Canada, and we were happy to see the Minister of Health's announcement of a critical drug reserve, as well as a mention of support, financial support for domestic biomanufacturing. However, our concerns still remain on the manufacture of critical drugs. In fact, in the last month, I have personally seen the shortage of magnesium sulfate, as have my colleagues. This is a really critical drug used for people with abnormal heart rhythms and pregnant woman with preeclampsia, and frankly, like all these conditions can lead to death if you don't have magnesium sulfate. So considering that we are having these ongoing shortages, we have 3 broad recommendations with specific policies we believe are necessary to solve this long-term problem and maintain supply chain security. Number 1, the critical drug reserve should be maintained after the COVID-19 pandemic for ongoing critical drug supply disruptions. Now, there is no clear definition of a critical medication, and at the University of Toronto, myself and many others have assembled a cross-disciplinary international working group of experts for this very task to define a critical medicines list. We're pending grant funding. I'm going to put a shameless plug that this is kind of the sort of research that should be further funded by the government. But I think that's a very important first step. Number 2, we need local production of critical drugs. We've certainly heard lots about PPE and vaccines. A multi-product facility for injectable critical drugs would only cost $50 million to set up. It would be able to make the ketamine and the propofol that I mentioned earlier. There's actually a proposed facility based out of the University of Alberta that could probably supply about 10% of our domestic needs with spare capacity for future pandemics and disasters. And it could also be expanded to make the drug precursors, which we know we're quite short in the last year and a half, and that would be another $50 million. So for a total of $100 million, we could guarantee sovereignty over our critical drug supply. Number 3, and the last point that I'll make is that we need to think about an overarching industrial policy to incubate and sustain these one-off public-private partnerships and domestic manufacturing. That could take the form of Buy Canadian provisions to help companies and governments get their money back for investing in these facilities. It could take the form of regulatory harmonization so that we actually align with trusted peers such as the European Medicines Association, the US Food and Drug Administration, and so on and so forth. Or it could even take the shape of a trade and regulatory alliance such as CANZUC, as proposed by a conservative leader, Aaron O'Toole. Regardless, I think there was a lot of really good work done by Health Canada in expediting approval of imports of critical drugs from other suppliers when they did go short. And I do think that is something that needs to be encouraged, and we need to make the kind of investment into manufacturing critical drugs that will ensure supply chain security going forward. These investments must be paired with smart industrial policy and ongoing research. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I believe Mr. Abakar is with us now. I don't know whether you've been tested or not with the Foundation for Black Communities. Go ahead, and we'll hope it works.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Can everyone hear me? How amazing. Thank you so much for your patience. What's that rule that says where technology can go wrong? It typically does, especially when it's important. So I'll try to make my opening comments very brief. Once again, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you to the chair and the rest of the Finance Committee for this important opportunity. My name is Lee Ben Abakor, and I'm a working group member with the Foundation for Black Communities, Canada's first ever philanthropic foundation dedicated to Black Canadians. The goal of the foundation is to ensure Black communities have reliable, relevant, and sustained access to the supports they need to thrive and define their own futures. In December of last year, 2020, the Foundation for Black Communities released a groundbreaking report entitled Unfunded: How Black Communities Are Overlooked by Canadian Philanthropy. In this report, the findings revealed systematic underinvestment of Black-led, Black-serving nonprofits and charities by Canada's leading philanthropic foundations. Through this systematic review of publicly available T3010 data, we found that as little as 7 cents out of every $100 granted by Canada's leading charities was going to Black communities. This systematic underfunding poses a critical threat to an already embattled community, reeling from the disproportionate health and economic impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. Black unemployment, as many of you may know, is at nearly 20%, more than double the national average. Black women and youth have been especially hit hardest by this economic downturn. Food insecurity and housing precarity are also at unprecedented levels and quickly accelerating. In nearly every indicator, the pandemic has left Black communities in crisis. Without strong and comprehensive investments, some of which we've seen in this budget to note, our community won't be able to participate in the ambitious goal of this government and this nation, which is to build back better. And that's simply an intolerable outcome. That's why we applaud the important steps taken in this budget to deliver on some of the demands from our community, namely the $100 million investment in the Supporting Black Communities Initiative and the $200 million investment to establish Canada's first Black-led philanthropic endowment, which is something we strongly advocated for at the Foundation for Black Communities, and something we want to take a moment to recognize all of the MPs and staffers that we had the chance to meet with during the discussions around this concept. While these featured pieces have caught the attention of most folks in our community, we recognize we can further unlock significant other benefits from the rest of the budget to support priority areas of Black communities, such as housing, business, science, and social finance, by applying a Black lens to the budget implementation and rollout. If I may, I want to give you two quick examples or two recommendations as to how we can unlock further benefit and participation for Black communities through this budget. The federal government is investing $750 million in social finance. The Social Finance Fund must establish, we believe, specific goals and objectives for how it can involve Black communities in developing and growing the social economy. More precisely, we're advocating for the establishment of a Black intermediary to assist the flow of funds to Black social purpose organizations. Similarly, in my final example, the federal government proposed a national housing strategy of $70 billion over 10 years. The housing crisis is not a level playing field, necessitating targeted and equitable solutions. CMHC must create and present a clear Black housing strategy that includes housing for aging seniors on fixed incomes, youth aging out of care, and affordable housing as a pathway for Black home ownership and generational wealth creation. So while we welcome these important investments and look forward to finding further ways to unlock greater impact and benefit from this unprecedented budget, we want to ensure that it does so in a way that ensures Black Canadians equitable participation in our nation's vision to build back better. With that said, I want to thank the committee once again for the opportunity to provide my opening remarks and look forward to answering any questions that you may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Before I turn to the last witness, the question lineup on the first round is Mr. Falk, Ms. Koutrakis, Mr. St. Marie, and Mr. Julian. Turning then to Startup Canada, Ms. Morano.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Natasha Morano, and I'm an entrepreneur. I'm honored to be here today representing Startup Canada as Corporate and Government Affairs Director. Since 2012, Startup Canada's programs have been a gateway to every stage of business cycle, from ideation to inception to growth. Startup Canada enables connections, education, promotion, and advocacy. We are accessible to 3.5 million entrepreneurs across the country, with 30 active communities from coast to coast to coast. To tell the story of every entrepreneur is, of course, an impossibility in 5 minutes. The differences among them are countless. What ties them together is that each take the reins of their own financial destiny. Many have started through passion, many more have been thrust into entrepreneurship through necessity, and many, unfortunately, have been left behind. Entrepreneurs are the pistons of the engine that create jobs, growth, and resilience. They are an essential piece of the country's economic recovery, and they rely on trusted authorities, experts, and qualified enablers of simplification. The infusion of funds that Budget 2021 offers will provide equitable access to support. It is an enormous step in reinvigorating an inclusive economy. Startup Canada is looking forward to the road ahead and the role that we can play in paving it. It is our goal to help ensure that there is no redundancy in the rollout of these programs and that the support offered in Budget 2021 gets into the hands of the entrepreneurs that so desperately need it in a quick and efficient manner. Entrepreneurs are the critical pistons in our nation's economy and in our recovery efforts through this pandemic, and they need a reliable ignition system. They need access to trusted organizations that know their pain points and develop programs in response to their needs. The Government of Canada should look to partner with like-minded organizations that are equally charged by powering up entrepreneurs and understands their needs. The government's investment of over $100 million to support inclusive entrepreneurial growth is designed to provide new funding for national organizations to uplift diverse entrepreneurs and small businesses across the country through financing, mentorship, and advisory services. This is an absolute mirror of Startup Canada's own mandate, so it is welcomed. The pandemic has displaced many Canadians in numerous industries. The Canadian Federation of Independent Businesses estimates that 239 businesses are at risk of closing because of the pandemic. This must be curbed. COVID-19 has claimed a disproportionate amount of jobs held by women. Women account for 37% of self-employed Canadians. Budget 2021 proposes to provide up to $146.9 million to strengthen the women entrepreneurship strategy. This is a good first step in supporting women entrepreneurs, but there needs to be more. There is an urgency in entrepreneurs to digitalize quickly, to move from storefront e-commerce, from neighborhood-based to cross-country, and from operating locally to exporting products and services abroad. The government's commitment to help entrepreneurs magnify the scope of their markets and increase the supply of well-paying jobs is welcomed. Startup Canada is pleased to see the government recognizes the importance of investing in programs that support businesses and entrepreneurs to be globally competitive. However, businesses start at different rates with different ultimate goals. There needs to be more early stage support for entrepreneurs who are not globally minded, but have become entrepreneurs out of necessity and are not the unicorns of tomorrow. They require simple, easy to use tools and advisory support as they are trying to make a living for their family. Startup Canada looks to simplify the process for the Government of Canada to roll out programs while also ensuring entrepreneurs have limited barriers to program entry. We need to make the journey of being an entrepreneur much easier. We need to consolidate and shepherd entrepreneurs through all of the available support that exists across the Canadian ecosystem, from incubators, accelerators, public and private sector support, and beyond. Entrepreneurs more than ever do not have the time to research what is available to them, particularly as these supports are revised or changed daily. Let's save them the time so they can work on their businesses and support the Canadian economy as a whole. Everything Budget 2021 sets out to do as it pertains to support for entrepreneurs is what we do on a daily basis. There is no better time to invest in Canada's entrepreneurial ecosystem. While there are numerous opportunities for entrepreneurs in Budget 2021, there remains a gap in support for early stage entrepreneurs who have that entrepreneurial spirit running through their veins. There is no safety net to capture them if they fall. These are the entrepreneurs who remain left behind and require support. They are asking for the foundational support to ensure they are equipped with sound advice and the advisory assistance they need to start their businesses on solid ground and consequently create jobs. Mr. Chair, Startup Canada is grateful for the opportunity to work with the government to throttle the economy fueled by Budget 2021. Thank you. Merci.
Thank you. You might get quoted on that pistons of the engines line. I see some of the farmers in this committee just really liking that line, Natasha. We'll start with Mr. Fox, 6-minute rounds. Go ahead, Ted.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I want to thank all the witnesses for coming to committee today and for the presentations that you made. And I was particularly interested in the presentations by Mr. Nareko and Ms. Gervais. I'm going to make the same mistake the chair did there. And but Ms. Gervais. And so I want to thank you for that. And, you know, it made me think back 20 years ago when I got my pilot's license, the time and the cost involved in doing that. And I was thinking even just 2 weeks ago when I read an article in the Globe and Mail where the RCF is considering hiring foreign pilots because of the pilot shortage here in Canada. And I know the cost of getting a pilot's license is not cheap. An employee of mine just received his pilot's license about a week and a half ago. It cost him about $10,000, and that was using his father's airplane. And so instructor time is not cheap, but the cost of entry to become a pilot is high. And then once you get your pilot's license, you spend a lot of time on the ramp at a minimum wage job, and then you hope to be hired on as a bush pilot, flying into the north or for some contractor or a tourist operator. If all of a sudden these flight schools have to start paying an additional 10% to buy their aircraft, how is that going to impact the education for people interested in becoming a pilot?
Who wants to take that? Go ahead.
Ms. Gervais, yep.
Okay,
Ms. Gervais.
sure. Well, so first of all, not many will be able to afford to pay that extra 10%. The cost of maintaining an aircraft alone is incredibly expensive. Most flight schools now operate aircraft that are at least 40 years old. Because of the cost of purchasing a new one. So this will definitely dissuade any flight school from purchasing any new aircraft that has the newer technology, and they'll decide to continue to maintain their older fleet. And the more the older fleet, the higher the cost to maintain an older fleet or to say purchase a new aircraft is, that cost will be passed on to the student. And just to give you an example, right now, 1 hour of flight training with an instructor on a said 40-year-old aircraft is $300 an hour. And pilots have to do a minimum, and that's a minimum. You have to be really, really good to get 40 hours on an aircraft before you can get your private pilot's license. So to increase the cost of flight training will make it almost unaffordable for students to get their new licenses, and that will definitely contribute to the pilot shortage that is inevitable in the coming future, partly due to the pandemic, but it was also we were also on the road to a pilot shortage even before the pandemic.
And even our military contracts flight schools to do training for them as well, is my understanding.
Yeah, in some areas, yeah, I know that the cadets, air cadets, actually do their flight training at other flight schools across the country, and so they'll just probably end up keeping the older aircraft, or if they do purchase the newer aircraft, then that cost will go on to D&D.
Good, thank you. Yeah, and Mr. Noreco, you talked about the downstream impact that this 10% tax is going to have on the aviation industry. You also talked about how contractors and business folks supply northern remote indigenous communities solely through the use of smaller aircraft. And can you elaborate a little bit more on what you see as some of the downstream impacts to the aviation industry of this 10% tax that's being proposed?
Absolutely, and I appreciate the question, Mr. Chair. So the thing I would raise here is just the idea that as we've seen through the pandemic, what we've come to see with the reductions of service is that the ability to visit Canadians across the communities where they live, coast to coast to coast, has been impacted. And so the decision of a 10% tax just makes the business decision to acquire these aircraft that much more difficult. And what it does is it puts to question the ability for our businesses, our employees and personnel in those communities to interact. A great example is, as part of the pandemic, we were asked and our industry stood up to help recover and repatriate Canadians from points all across the globe. We've had business aviation providers flying PPE to communities in the north, whether they're related to oil and gas, whether they're related to just communities that are in need. And so this critical asset, I mean, we joke and we call it a time machine, but what it is, it does exactly that. It returns time to those individuals, to those corporations. And in this case, we're seeing very much that the ability to connect with the communities across this country is being impacted. And this is where our business aviation operators are able to fill that gap and keep those Canadians connected and our corporations busy with economic activity.
Last question, Ted.
Okay. Yeah. So just to follow up a little bit more on that, Ms. Gervais, you indicated that the cost of a really entry-level new aircraft that a flight school would use is $500,000. That's just the entry level. What from there, where does the cost go?
So a $500,000 aircraft is a single engine aircraft with 4 seats that usually has a pilot and a flight instructor. And the reason it has 4 seats is you could put 4 people in there, but no luggage, or you could put 2 people there, full fuel, and do a lot of flight training. The cost of general aviation aircraft goes upwards to over $1 million. And that's, that could be just for float planes or just a smaller training aircraft. And then if you want to go into aircraft that are used more for business purposes, you're going in upwards of, millions of dollars. It's really anywhere from $500,000 to millions of dollars.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all. Ms. Koutrakis, followed by Mr. St. Marie. Annie?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome to all our witnesses this afternoon. My first question will go to Mr. Abakor. You touched upon this, briefly in your opening remarks, but I'm just wondering, I'd like to give you the opportunity to further expand and provide the committee with additional information on the inequalities and barriers that Black-led charities and organizations face when accessing funding.
Thank you so much, member. I would, I'll take a step back and I'll try as briefly as I can explain that the Canadian philanthropic sector is about $86 billion with about upwards of nearly 10,000 foundations in existence. Not one of those foundations is dedicated to or sees Black communities as a primary constituent of their work. So that means that we're locked out of effectively what is a safety net for the national safety net. And when you consider not only that the dollars aren't allocated there, the membership, as Senator Omvar and others have done, they've shown that Canadian philanthropy is nearly, the phrase everyone uses is quite white. They were absent from leadership at every single strata, from board to executive leadership, and those impact the kinds of decisions one makes in terms of the issues that they find of import. Finally, I would point to the CRA and some tax laws. Nearly 70% of Black-led, Black-serving organizations are not charitable, and therefore many of these foundations find that their inability to fund, because their restriction to fund qualified donees, limits their capacity to get to serving Black-led, Black-serving organizations. So in part, it's lack of relationships that means that you're not identifying where the needs are, but it's also structural challenges through our tax codes that have impeded their possible delivery of dollars to where the needs are. My final comment to Chair and to members would be that when the pandemic hit, it was Black-led not-for-profits that really stepped up to provide seniors care, travel to food banks, PPE, and so much more. Had a foundation for Black communities and others like it existed on March of 2020 last year. Just think about the lives that could have been saved. When I say that the community service sector, primarily Black-led, Black-serving not-for-profit charities, are indispensable, we would literally mean that. They are very much lifelines to our community, and a community that's reeling with its needs so heightened, it cannot be stressed enough the urgency to which supporting these organizations is critical to our building back better. I hope I've answered your question. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm curious to know and to hear from you. So do you think that the new Black-led philanthropic endowment fund will address some of those challenges?
I absolutely
and how
Yeah.
would you see that making a difference?
Thank you. I absolutely do. One of the goals is through the endowment is to create a long-term sustainable funding ecosystem for Black-led, Black-serving charities. Again, while that is an incredible start, I do want to mention that the typical disbursement, the disbursement quota currently under CRA is 3.5%. Some really progressive foundations fund at 5%. So at 5% of 200 million, we're really talking about approximately $10 million a year at a national scale. 10 million, just to put that in perspective, Ontario Trillium Foundation funds out $200 million a year, and that's just to the province alone. For Black Canadians, it's 1.2 million Black people across this country without a philanthropic home. $10 million a year in spending to support their needs, resources, and services. It's certainly, it's simply not enough from an endowment standpoint, but it is an incredibly important start, and one that I think is important to note is the creation of a legacy that now determines Black or communities have some self-determined ability and self-reliant ability to fund the projects that are their priorities on their own terms. And that's something I think worth applauding and thinking about how do we continue to support and increase further investments in subsequent budgets. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, do I have time for one more?
Yep, you've got time for another question.
Great, thank you. My next question is to Ms. Morano. Ms. Morano, with regards to the Small Business and Entrepreneurship Development Program, your organization has noted that Startup Canada is the only national organization capable of delivering on every objective. Can you expand on this comment and share your thoughts on how Startup Canada can support the work and objectives of the program?
Absolutely. Thank you very much for the question. And before I answer the question, I'd just like to make a quick correction. I missed an important word in my presentation when I was mentioning the Canadian Federation of Independent Businesses and the estimated businesses that are at risk of closing. I said 239,000. It's 239,000. So thank you for just letting me be able to correct that. That changes the dynamic quite drastically. To answer your question, Startup Canada is a national convener organization. We are not a competitor. We work with accelerators, we work with incubators, we work with other support organizations in the ecosystem, and we constantly receive feedback from entrepreneurs from coast to coast to coast regarding where their biggest pain points are. Something that we hold very dear to our hearts is that we provide entrepreneurs with the solid foundation to ensure they're equipped and ready to start businesses. This, to me, is an important aspect of what the government is really trying to communicate in recognizing the importance of entrepreneurs, playing a critical role in job creation and job growth. We create the entrepreneurs that are going to be creating the companies and for tomorrow, as well as with pertaining to job creation. And so because we work with every single entrepreneur, regardless of where they are in their entrepreneurship journey, we have programs that are created in response to their needs. And so when I say that we're the only national organization that's capable of supporting, we are already doing all of this. And so we're looking to the government, we're coming to the government saying, look, we're a trusted voice. Entrepreneurs come to us, they trust us, they know that we're able to support them regardless of where they are in their journey. We would love to be able to partner formally with the government to be able to amplify our impact and deliver on really being able to provide the end user, that being entrepreneurs, with the tools, resources, and services that the government seems to be very keen on wanting to do to support with job creation and job growth.
Thank you. Thank you all. Turning then to Mr. St. Marie, followed by Mr. Julian. Gabriel, 6 minutes.
Oui, merci Wayne. Alors d'abord.
Thank you, Wayne. First, welcome to all the witnesses and thank you again for your presentations. Once again, very enriching, instructive information. My questions are for the Alliance d'Industrie Touristique du Québec. Mr. Paquet, thank you for your presentation and welcome to you and Mr. Ryan today. It's quite worrisome, your report, Mr. Paquet. You said that as long as the borders aren't reopened, we need to keep the subsidy levels as they are for the tourism sector. And they're being extended until September, but the rates are going to be reduced. Is that correct? Yes, that's what we're being told, says Mr. Paquet. The budget sets out a drop in rates through to September. Perhaps there will be an extension through December, but summer will be like last year, where only a fraction of the revenues will come in to the tourism sector. So there'll have to be a focus on local tourists, whereas over half of the tourism revenue usually comes from those, at least in Quebec's case, from outside Quebec. So this is only a small fraction of the normal revenue, and that won't be enough to cover the winter, specifically when we need the queues and the SIRS in the winter and the fall. Now, the pandemic hit the tourism sector really hard. We have a patient on the operating table, and it's not time to let that patient go without life support. We need to support that patient. We need to help the patient get back up on his feet and rehabilitate the patient, and that's what we want and need. We are afraid that in the summer, many businesses that have had to go into debt to weather the storm and to survive, to stay afloat, the programs that were available mainly from the federal government in Quebec were loans, and they've got indebted in order to keep afloat. And in the fall, in all likelihood, there will be businesses in dire straits, even more precarious than they were previously. Well, thank you. Mr. Ryan, you wanted to add to that? Yes, if I may indeed just chime in and tack on to what Eric said. We are into a second cycle, a second year of pandemics, closed borders, of lockdowns, and the government assistance that was put in place in terms of the wage subsidy and the rent subsidy was truly beneficial, but we need more predictability for the upcoming year. And that's evident so that we can, in fact, retain the current labour force. We need to be able to keep our teams in place for next year. Now, at the last meeting I attended, we talked about early 2022 as the earliest point where we might see a true recovery, because this is the second year in a row of restrictions and lockdown. Well, thank you very much. As you've both clearly demonstrated, these are, for the most part, seasonal sectors, and their income is mostly in the summer. There's no full reopening, and so with what they earn over the course of the summer, they have to keep afloat. Now, you said that the Minister, Mr. Paquet, should extend that period and also increase the rates, because he has the power to do so. Now, were the committee to move an amendment to the effect that the Minister would be empowered to target certain sectors such as yours, would that be a beneficial measure to put in place? Response: well, that's the solution that we're putting forward. We'd like the programs to be kept at the same levels as they currently are. They should be extended until the sector no longer needs them. The tourism sector has never asked for anything. It's never begged. It's a flourishing, booming, burgeoning sector. And before the pandemic, we were talking about $150 billion. In Quebec, $16 billion. And in Quebec has lost over 60% of its revenue because there's been a 60% drop in tourism spending during the pandemic. So give us the time to catch our breath. That's what we're asking for. If there's a plan to reopen the borders, we need predictability so that we can have a smooth transition to bring the tourists back. It'll take months. And as soon as revenues come back to previous levels, well, the companies and businesses will no longer be eligible for the subsidies. There are a lot of studies, including a Desjardins study, that demonstrated that 95% of the economy is back on track, and just a couple of sectors such as aeronautics, culture and tourism are still doing it tough. So we're saying extend these benefits and as long as we need them, and all we want is for it to be as short as possible period. If I may just chime in once again, in addition to the survival of these businesses, there's their ability to bounce back in the future. We need to understand that Canada and Quebec will be competing with international markets that will be in fierce competition when it comes to advertising, investments in tourism, infrastructure, and the products themselves. So we need to be able to compete with those big markets domestically. We need an exit strategy, but we also need support that will enable the Canadian and Quebec tourism sector to bounce back. Excellent. Very clear. Thank you very much. I'll continue my questioning in the next round. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. Turning to Mr. Julian, and starting the next round will be Mr. Kelly. Peter?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thanks to all our witnesses for being here today. And as we navigate through the troubled waters of the third wave, we hope that you and your families continue to stay safe and healthy. Thank you for being here. I'd like to start with Dr. Hamid. You have raised a very important testimony, as have all the witnesses. Your testimony in terms of critical drugs is fundamentally important. There is another element, though, of course, and that is access to medication. As you know, there's about 10 million Canadians that have no drug plan, no medication plan. So that access to critical drugs falls short because we don't have public universal pharmacare. And the government did make a commitment back in 2019 that they would bring that into place. But unfortunately, tragically, in this bill, the government has abandoned its commitments. How important is it to have in place public universal pharmacare so that not only is are critical drugs available, but that Canadians can actually access them regardless of their ability to pay?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So I think if I were to take a step back on that, certainly there are challenges with access to medications, and I can empathize with many Canadians. About 15% of our patients cannot afford their medications. And there's many of my colleagues, in particular at the University of Toronto, who have advocated on this for a long time. So there are many of those colleagues who have said that establishing a national formulary or a essential medicines list would be certainly one plank and one way to move forward on national pharmacare. I should add that in the letter that we had received back from Health Canada after our public letter to the Prime Minister, there has been talk about creating a transition office for the Canada Drug Agency, which would in fact do something like that. I would say that when it comes to the matter of critical drugs, which is really my primary concern, it has been, because I think it's something that's been overlooked as we funded PPE and vaccines and everything else that's been really vital over the last year and a half, is there's many global factors as well that causes these issues. So, we relied on single source suppliers. So for example, there's a shortage of magnesium, which I mentioned in my opening statement. That's one supplier from Europe, and they went short for manufacturing production reasons. And now we're kind of scrambling. So there's a lot of these global factors because we have these just-in-time supply chains, and it causes a lot of unpredictability. And so
I'm sorry to cut you off. I have other questions for other witnesses. But thank you very much. I'd like to go to Mr. Abercor. I was really struck by your statistic, and I hope I heard it correctly. 7 cents out of every $100 in measures actually goes to the Black community. And when we look at the proportionality of what funding should be in terms of the overall philanthropic sector, shouldn't we be talking about $3 or $4 billion available to organizations that prioritize the needs of Black Canadians?
I think you've just given my comment. I would repeat everything you just said and pretend as if I said it. From an equitable standpoint, what we're talking about is helping a community. We're not talking about getting on base. We're talking about a community that's actually outside of the stadium to this point. And getting them to the start line requires significant investments. In this case, you heard it correct. It is 7 cents for every $100. About $7 billion a year in charitable spending occur in this country. And when you think about that, 17% of that $7 billion goes towards, for instance, healthcare. And when you consider the issues that impact Black communities in the area of healthcare, none of that funding goes to priorities of Black healthcare, as an example, right? And this goes across the gamut. There isn't a single foundation in this country that doesn't deal with an issue that intersects Black needs, yet there is a significant underinvestment. So to your point, and to the member's earlier question, this $200 million goes a long way. It's a wonderful start. But if we're talking about building back better and helping everyone catch up and build equal footing, we're going to need to look at a significantly larger investment over time to really start addressing some of the massive disparities that we see. I mentioned some of those to you earlier in my opening statements: housing,
last question,
food,
Peter,
and so forth.
Yeah, so really we're talking about the requirements really to achieve the kind of equality that we should. The quality of opportunity in this country is 15 to 20 times what the initial amount has been. So it's a small step, but we have to go much, much further, particularly when we look at the legacy of systemic racism in our country.
Yeah, it's an important step. It's an important step, as I think it sends it provides a pool of dollars that can attract further investments from various other sectors beyond government. Because I think it's important to note that the disparities aren't always a result necessarily of government or poor policy, and there are others that can make these contributions. And frankly, government coming to the table in this instance, I think creates a wonderful concept, a proof of concept for why this is necessary. But frankly, to your point, it does require significant greater investment, and we're hoping that this is simply a catalyst for future dollars in this important area.
Thank you all. Turning into a 5-minute round, Mr. Kelly, followed by Mr. Fragiskatis. Pat? You're muted, Pat.
Yeah, caught it there. My first question, I think I'll put to Mr. Paquette. You spoke in your opening statement about the need for a clear, data-driven plan to safely and permanently reopen the economy. Actually, I don't recall if you mentioned the permanent part, but what you had spoken about was very similar to a motion that we debated in the Commons a while ago. Can you talk about the necessity for a business owner or for a business manager and for the workers that depend on businesses so severely affected by COVID to have a proper plan that will eventually lead to reopening?
Jean-Michel, you want to start to answer as a business owner, or you want me to?
Can go. Essentiellement, on parle de...
Well, basically, it's about predictability. That is the ability to know ahead of time whether the borders will be reopened in 3 months, in 6 months, and what will that impact be on forecasting potential clientele. Our ability to keep our staff retained, as I said earlier. We need to keep that core of staffing and to be able to tell them that they're going to continue to be able to work with us. We don't want to lose them, otherwise we will. And in order to avoid drastic cutbacks in terms of investments, in terms of staffing, we need to be able to bounce back. So these are all aspects of predictability that will enable us to plan our upgrading of infrastructures. For example, the Amel cruises in Quebec. We need to prepare the cruise ships. We need to get them ready to then sail. It's not just, push a button tomorrow and the cruise ship sets sail. There's months and weeks of lead up to that in terms of maintenance and so on. And if there's no predictability, owners and operators won't be ready at the requisite time because they wouldn't have planned in advance. And they probably won't have the labour to staff their operations because they probably have to lay off staff, which will be difficult to recruit in the context of a pandemic. Well, that's one of the major irritants for owner-operators in the tourism sector. That is a lack of predictability. For the past 15 months, they've been operating at a fraction of their normal revenue, and the predictability that they do enjoy is for 2 or 3 months only. So what we're calling for, what they are calling for, is a reopening plan for the borders that will enable them to predict, to forecast what investments they will need to make in order to maintain their assets and also keep their staff on board, which isn't necessarily easy in the context of a pandemic. And our international partners in Europe and elsewhere are seeing that they have plans that are being put in place that we could emulate or draw inspiration from at the very least.
Thank you. I was actually struck by Mr. Ryan on the mentioning the cruise industry specifically, so that we had some questions this afternoon in the House on that. What we've seen on the West Coast is the discrepancy in vaccination rates between Canada and the United States is a driver behind just simply skipping Canada. And the necessity of ongoing health measures in Canada in absence of mass immunization being achieved. We're seeing cruises. The cruises are just going to bypass the Canadian ports on the way to Alaska. The East Coast also has a cruise industry. You mentioned it, and is there any hope for a cruise industry? I mean, I know there are a number of ports in Eastern Canada that are popular with both American and domestic tourists.
En fait,
Well, the fact of the matter is, in Quebec, when I referred to the Emel cruise ships, this is the biggest private operator in Canada for example, the St. Lawrence. Now, when it comes to international cruise ship lines, as you mentioned, if there's no herd immunity, there's no predictability in terms of reopening the borders, the international cruise liners will set out their activities primarily in other countries. And the same is true of conventions. There important to urban centres in Canada, Montreal in the case of Quebec, and of course Vancouver and Toronto. So once again, if there's no predictability when it comes to reopening of the borders and other aspects, well then in 2022, well, maybe we'll have to wait till 2023 for new clients, and we'll miss the boat in 2022. And there's this whole ecosystem for conventions and cruise ships, which have a springboard effect in terms of commerce and business in the areas where they operate. So that's the spin-off effects or lack thereof. So we need support measures in the meantime. And we also need to know when the borders are going to be reopened so that we can negotiate our agreements with tour operators and so on and so forth.
Okay, we will have to end it there. Thank you all. Turning to Mr. Fragascatas, who will be followed by Gabriel St. Marie. Peter?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to all witnesses today. Mr. Ahmed, a really interesting presentation, very important issues raised, obviously. I take your point and I agree with you that where the government has acted, and I think it needs to be acknowledged, it's done a great deal over the past few months, especially to ensure that we have an adequate supply of PPE going forward, that we have also facilities being supported in Canada to produce vaccine well into the future, and we're going to see something materialize clearly in Quebec in August of this year. But we've also seen a number of announcements that are really critical as far as securing the long term. The question I want to put to you, though, is on critical drug shortages. How concerned are you? And as a way of getting to that question, can you define what we're actually talking about when we talk about critical drugs, just so we're on the same page?
For sure. So to answer the first part of your question, which is my concern, I'd say it's kind of a low level baseline of anxiety, not something that probably wake me up in the middle of the night with a cold sweat, but we know that the drug shortages have increased in time and the length of the shortages have been increasing. And particularly with the extraordinary powers that the Minister of Health has had in the last year, Health Canada has moved really quickly with urgent importation. And, so we were getting like different labeled propofol, which was like in Swedish and stuff like that. Like we really have moved quite nimbly and with agility. But these issues are increasing and we really need a long-term solution. And so that's where I think, thank you for asking me to clarify what I mean by critical drugs, because it is a working definition that we have so far. I mean, certainly the critical drug reserve that the Minister of Health announced is 12 drugs so far. It's for COVID-19. The Food and Drug Administration in the US has created a similar list, but they actually looked at all the inputs. So they even looked at oxygen and masks and that kind of thing required for COVID-19. But I would say that it's really a medication, the absence of which there would be irremediable harm or death. And there's plenty of those medications needed for people that I see in the ER every day in ICUs.
Thank you very much. Are there particular critical drugs that you and the organization that you're speaking on behalf of today are especially concerned about? I note that because in your presentation, you mentioned propofol several times, ketamine several times, fentanyl several times. Is that where the issue is?
It has been a major issue for sure. And the interesting thing is a lot of these medications are generics. So they actually have been generics for decades. About 77% of the medications that do go short are generics. So we should be able to actually make them relatively easily. It's just a matter of the money. The reason that I brought up the sedatives in particular is that I've heard from many intensivists in hospitals down south where they've had to do rotations. So they've, conserved supplies. They have to switch to another formulation. None of this is ideal. The terrible thing when it comes to fentanyl and other opiates, for example, we did have morphine shortages, is that those are used in palliative care as well. So there was a lot of concern, and we were liaising with the palliative care associations in that can cause, obviously, undue suffering for people at the end of life.
Dr. Ahmed, I don't believe that any MP on in this committee is a medical doctor, and so can you just clarify for us propofol, ketamine, and fentanyl? How? I mean, because you are pointing to those as a real concern. What do they do?
They
What are they
basically put you under.
Okay, right.
Yeah. So they'll sedate you and allow us to put you on ventilators, but they can also be used for pain control, for procedures, for all sorts of things. End of life suffering. We use fentanyl and morphine. They're all kind of derivatives of opiates.
And we're largely, with my last 30 seconds here, Chair, we're largely dependent on the importation of those right now. Is that very fair to say?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you for your advocacy and your work on this. It is it's deeply appreciated. As you yourself said, the government has taken important steps in PPE and on vaccinations, but there's clearly more to do, and would love to hear more from your organization in the coming weeks, months, and beyond.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. Before I turn to Mr. St. Marie and then Mr. Julian, I know Finance Committee is used to an hour and a half panel. We get 2 hours this time. So I have following on my list is Mr. St. Marie, Mr. Julian, Ms. Jansen, Mr. Fraser, and I have Mr. McLeod down that. Do you want in Mr. Fast before Mr. McLeod? Okay. And we'll likely have time after that as well, which is unusual for this committee. Mr. St. Marie.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And yes, once again, some very interesting exchanges. Mr. Paquet and Mr. Ryan. Now, we have understood the importance of predictability for the industry. It's hugely important, not only for right now, but for the 2022 season. We've grasped that notion, and I hope that the government has heard that message loud and clear as well. Mr. Paquet, you alluded to a number of countries that have already put in place reopening plans that we could perhaps emulate. Could you please give us a couple of examples that the federal government could emulate to better support your industry? Thank you. Well, absolutely. If we look in Europe, in terms of travel and movement, there's a lot on the table right now under discussion. The same is true for Great Britain. These are examples that we can take inspiration from, not only in terms of the rules that should be followed, but the technology that is being put to good use. I know that there's discussion about a vaccine passport, quote unquote, that the tourism sector is perfectly comfortable with. It's not going to put a brake on business, that's for sure, and it will provide for some level of coherency and uniformity when it comes to evidence of one being vaccinated and the tools to prove it. Thank you. Perhaps another question. You spoke about businesses getting into debt over their head and sectors of the industry that are more hard hit than others, conventions, cruise ships, the difficulty of retaining employees. What's the current level of morale among your employees right now? Well, listen, I'm responsible for a group, the Conférence Québec Tourisme, which comprises about a dozen female and male business persons, and I can tell you that it wasn't easy to hold that virtual conference recently, but with the upcoming announcements on the reopening, it's a bit of a bandage to the wounds, if you will. But there are many business persons that aren't just on their knees, but many are in debt to the tune of thousands of dollars. And we're not just talking about businesses that were just hanging in there prior to the pandemic. We're talking about businesses, major companies, big employers that had huge profit margins that are not as well off as they were pre-pandemic. Now, I'm not going to single out those particular businesses, but businesses that used to be able to hire over 250 employees can now only hire about 50. So broadly speaking, there are some businesses that have managed okay, some particularly last summer in certain subsectors, but broadly speaking, most are in a more precarious financial position. And basically next summer will benefit from only local tourists, and we predict that by the fall things will become even tougher for these businesses. Message heard loud and clear. Do I have much time left, Mr. Chairman? I have 5 minutes.
As a matter of fact, Gabriel.
I see.
Mr. Julian, followed by Ms. Jansen. Go ahead, Peter.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. My next questions are for Ms. Gervais and Mr. Naresko. The context of this so-called luxury tax is that many countries have adopted wealth taxes, and Canada has not been the exception in terms of the profits that we've seen in certain sectors during this pandemic. In fact, a few dozen Canadian billionaire families have increased their wealth by about $80 billion. So what most countries have done, many countries have done, is put into place a wealth tax. And that's certainly what many Canadians were calling for in this budget. Instead of the wealth tax, which the Parliamentary Budgetary Officer said was a legitimate tool and would have brought in billions of dollars of support, the government seems to be spinning around this so-called luxury tax. And in a sense, it seems to be making your industry a scapegoat for what really should be a broader fiscal taxation approach that the government has not put into place. So I'm wondering what the impact is of targeting your industry and your pilots and owners, when what the government should have done is actually put into place a broader wealth tax that certainly, for those who've benefited the most from the pandemic, would have actually been a much more fair and equitable approach. Do you feel targeted, and do you feel this makes any sense? And what is the impact of this government? What is political spin on this tax that seems so misguided?
I'll let my Anthony go first this time, and then I'll follow him. I'll go second.
Appreciate it. Thanks for the question, Mr. Chair. So what I would add first, and I appreciate the question, with respect to the luxury tax, we need to understand the impact to the industry. Business aviation as a whole generates on average 33 million in GDP for the country every single day. Canadians that are employed in the business aviation sector earn on average $95,000 per year. So we've got an employee base. When you look at the provinces where our employers typically, or where these employees are based, we talk about Quebec or just under 11,000 jobs. In Ontario, over 5,000. Alberta, over 2,500, and NBC, 2,300. And so the potential impact here is looking at the impact to businesses as a result of these changes. When you look at manufacturers such as Bombardier, CAE, Pratt & Whitney, just to name those few, they're critical for how we connect across the globe. We know that a line that we'll use is, business, we need to move at the speed of business. So whether it was earlier the conversations around tourism and the requirement for a consistent plan, the challenge to the luxury tax is that while we have in place today, and I think as the question alluded to, GST and PST, we have, if you're using the aircraft in personal use, those taxes are already contemplated, and the Income Tax Act states what aircraft can or couldn't be used, and that definition is sufficient. So on balance, the luxury tax does hurt the Canadian industry, the employees involved, and the businesses that need to stay connected around the globe.
Ms. Gervais, did you want to add a little to that? And then we'll let him move on to the next question.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that, yes, we definitely do feel targeted. And I think there's this preconceived notion that anyone who has an aircraft is super rich. They watch these TV shows and they're jet setting in their private jets from like one country to the next. But from what we can see from my presentation, those are not the people that are actually flying these private aircraft. And those are not the ones that are going to be, and the people that actually own these aircraft are the ones that are going to be penalized. It's going to be the flight training schools. It's going to be the agricultural industry. It's going to be the Canadian manufacturers. They're the ones who are going to be penalized, and it's not this preconceived notion of who these private aircraft owners are.
Thank you all. Ms. Jansen, followed by Mr. Fraser. Ms. Jansen.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to direct my first question to Ms. Gervais. You kind of, during your presentation, you talked about the fact that the this budget, there's an equivalency flaw when you compare an airplane to a boat or a luxury car. You use the term highly unrealistic. You mentioned that it's going to be medical professionals, it'll be small business owners, it'll be farmers, aircraft training centers. These are the people that are going to be impacted. And I'm just wondering, considering the massive amount of impact, how much consultation did your industry have with the Liberal government before they put this into place?
Thank you for that question. When they first introduced the question in late 2020, we did submit some feedback as to how this would impact our industry. Much was addressed what I said. And to give you an idea, there are about 36,000 registered aircraft in Canada, and 83% of those are general aviation aircraft. And most of those general aviation aircraft are used for flight training. More than half are used for flight training. So that is the extent of the consultation that was done for us. We provided some feedback at the end of December or November of 2019, and that's about it.
So you would say then that either they didn't hear what you put forward or
Correct.
They didn't ask enough questions?
I'd say both.
Now, you definitely said that pilot shortages will be inevitable under this new legislation. Could you maybe broaden out on that?
Well, so there's already going to be a pilot shortage. Those expectations were done even prior to the pandemic. And now with all of the layoffs that happened during the pandemic, many pilots will not be returning to their flying career. They'll be choosing other careers instead where they don't have to risk their livelihood. So there's already going to be a shortage for when the economy reopens and when the flights resume.
Right.
And of course, a lot of the flight training being conducted right now in Canada is from overseas. So they're taking up a lot of the flight instructors, and flight instructors are going to be going to the regional airlines. The regional airlines are going to be going to the larger carriers. So we're going to be missing a lot of the instructors. If there's no instructors, then there's no one to instruct the new generation. And then you add cost on top of that, and flight schools just can't make ends meet anymore.
Right. Right. Now, Mr. Noriko, you mentioned that this is going to impact business suits to construction boots. And you said actually very few of these aircraft fall into the personal luxury dimension. And you also said that this is going to incent them to hold on to their older planes, which means we will not be reducing our carbon footprint, and that people will probably purchase and register elsewhere. I wonder if you can explain to me, you said that there was no distinction made between personal and commercial. Could you broaden out on that?
Sure, and I appreciate the question. So with respect to personal, I mean, the way it was presented, there is still some room for interpretation with respect to certain commercial activities. There's language that states aircraft under 39 seats don't qualify. And what we're trying to recognize is that it's the importance of not just the industry within Canada, that is to say aviation and aerospace, the importance in the research and development, those things that go on. When we can celebrate on the matter of sustainability, when we talk about the first to use winglets, 1977 business aircraft, when we talk about composite technology, first to use that business aircraft. So when we go to this definition, that's still some of the work that's required, perhaps a backgrounder that's put out. But in the end, what needs to be recognized is that for the amount of revenue extracted from this tax on aircraft, the cost associated to the Canadian economy far outweighs any benefit from the potential revenue that we would extract.
Yes, that's a really shocking statement. You mentioned that it the benefit far outweighs, the tax far outweighs, yes. yeah, sorry, which is very shocking, and I just wonder why it went that way. Mr. Ahmed, now I have a question for you. I was on the health committee in the beginning when the pandemic began, and there was a lot of discussion about the strategic stockpile, and now you're talking about a critical drug reserve. Now, we had a pandemic plan in place, and for some reason it didn't seem to function. So I'm wondering, what would this government do different? We should have had
the critical drug reserve, and we didn't. I know they mentioned they were focusing on antivirals. They didn't seem to focus on the kinds of things we actually needed. Could you speak to how are we going to make that better going forward?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So I guess what you're alluding to is a national strategic emergency stockpile, which we do know had funding cut in the lead up to the pandemic. And certainly there were challenges. I think in administration, there was PPE that was expired. It's supposed to have some of these other medications that we need for people who would get sick with like a viral illness like COVID. So, and it's supposed to have ventilators as well. So my hope going forward would be that this critical drug reserve, which presumably is the new name for the strategic stockpile, would be funded and would continue, and that we would actually have ongoing analysis of like international supply chains. Because the challenge is obviously, keeping some of these medications in stockpiles, they can often expire. And when I've talked to different organizations and industry experts as well, there have been suggestions that perhaps we could actually get factories overseas or some of our factories here to hold the precursors for the drugs, or even stockpile that way so that we have industry managing it, because that might actually mean that they just are better at doing that and kind of letting government do what it does best, right?
I like that.
Yeah, so there have been different proposals. I think it's something that really needs further investigation. I think the critical drug reserve is definitely a step in the right direction, and it could be that in the future after this pandemic, we say, the research, for example, that I'm doing at the University of Toronto is, okay, these are 20 drugs. We really need to make sure they're in supply. Maybe we work out an agreement with these 4 suppliers that are providing us imports of these drugs, that they hold on to a certain supply and they kind of keep reporting to us, and that's the new form of the critical drug reserve. There could be some shape or form.
Okay, we're well over on that one. We'll go to Mr. Fraser, followed by Mr. Fast. Go ahead, Sean.
Thank you, Chair. My first question is for our guest from Startup Canada. Thank you very much for being here, and really appreciate your testimony. You mentioned during your remarks that we need to focus not exclusively on the next billion-dollar valuation, so-called unicorn, when we're focusing on startup cultures, but rather than those home runs, if you'll allow me a baseball analogy, the base hits, those people who are starting businesses because they need to, because they can find work in their own community. And you discussed in some specificity the importance of advisory services. I've seen certain services on the ground, whether it's through CBDCs, through the Community Futures Program, financing programs that are fully funded by the federal government, but also paired with those advisory services. And lo and behold, this will be no surprise to you, those clients that have that kind of advisory service tied to their financing have a much higher degree of success in the first few years as compared to other businesses. So my question to you is, how can we design a federal program that actually plugs those entrepreneurs and communities right across Canada into the kind of advisory services that are going to help them succeed? Is it rolling it into the CBDC programs that already exist? Is it something new, or is there some different policy that I've not thought of that you can coach us towards here?
Thank you very much for the question, and I do appreciate the baseball analogy. I'm a Toronto Blue Jays fan, so there we go. It's on the record.
Me too. Go Jays.
Yes, exactly. I think it's a bit of a hybrid approach, to be honest with you. What really sets Startup Canada apart from other organizations, and what's really given us our reputation throughout the years, is that we work in collaboration. We work in collaboration with support organizations such as, BDC. We're part of the CANE network, so although we're not an incubator and an accelerator, we're the only non-incubator and accelerator that's part of that network. But most importantly, we work with entrepreneurs. Our programs are created in direct response and in demand of what entrepreneurs are looking for, what they're requesting, what they need. And so in my presentation, I was very clear in indicating that we are here, we are offering our support to the Government of Canada. We have the active base through our entrepreneurship network, and we would love to be able to work in conjunction and in partnership with government while bringing in the entrepreneurial voice to make sure that these programs are created in a way that meets the end user in a way that will benefit them, not just what, perhaps an organization thinks is the best methodology to support entrepreneurs. So a long-winded reply to your answer is a hybrid model, consultations, collaboration, and that's what really sets Startup Canada apart from other organizations.
Excellent. Look, if I have time, I'll have a follow-up, but I do have another question for Dr. Ahmed. Thank you for the work that you're doing. I've got sisters who are healthcare providers who've worked in Northern Ontario, whether it's Timmins or Sioux Lookout, and some of the problems you've described are not the first time I've heard them. You mentioned in particular the cost of getting some of these critical drug shortages set up to as security of the supply chain, initially about $15 million. And I think you said $100 million to guarantee the sovereignty of our supply. Is this a one-time startup cost on a system that would otherwise be able to self-finance through the production of drugs they could sell at a commercial scale? I just want to confirm, for this one-time investment, you're suggesting we could forever secure the sovereignty of our drug supply for these critical drugs?
No, thank you for asking me to clarify. So it would be 50 million for a multi-product sterile injectable facility. So the area where we have the most, I guess, the lack of capacity for making things is injectables. So those are the most medications used for critical reasons. And for 50 million, we could set up a facility. When I've talked to the outfit out of the University of Alberta, their plan would be to actually sell these internationally as well, so they could sort of self-finance and self-fund and be sustainable. And then there are some certain things called precursors to drugs. That's where we've also had a lot of problems. And China seems to have a stranglehold on making these precursors. So you often hear about, generic drugs being made in India and all over the place, but the precursors to those are actually 70% of them are made in China. So if we were able to spend another 50 million one time, we could also set that up and actually have complete sovereignty.
And how close to ready to go are these projects? If they had money tomorrow, could they start?
They actually have a Health Canada drug establishment license. So that's pretty much as close as possible, yeah.
Okay.
You've got a quick one for Ms. Moreno again, you thought? Sean?
Yeah, sure. Well, since I've got time for the follow-up, Ms. Moreno, I'm just wondering with your network, how well established you are in the different regions of Canada. If we entered a partnership with your organization, for example, are you plugged into the Atlantic region, to Canada's north, as well as our more urban centers across the country?
Absolutely. Thank you again for the question. We are a national organization with representation from coast to coast to coast. What really sets Startup Canada apart from other organizations is our flagship program, which is our Startup Communities. Our Startup Communities lay the foundation of really a pan-Canadian infrastructure to accelerate the creation of startup communities everywhere and create a robust entrepreneurship landscape. And so our programs are rolled out nationally in conjunction with our robust communities from coast to coast to coast. And it's something that we're certainly looking to be able to expand upon. And perhaps with the support from the Government of Canada, we can increase our representation from across the country.
Thank you. Thank you all. We'll go to Mr. Fast, followed by Mr. McLeod. Ed?
Well, thank you. I'll ask my first question to Mr. Noriko. I want to agree with Mr. Julian. We rarely do, but in this case, quite frankly, if the target was the wealthy, all that this Liberal government has done is inflict massive unintended collateral damage on an industry that can't afford it in the middle of a pandemic. Especially for $15 million of revenue, tax revenue, perhaps. Have you reached out to the government to discuss your concerns about the budget that's been tabled and whether there's a way of perhaps reversing course on this?
I appreciate the question. Thank you. So we have, and in fact, when I believe it was the election platform in 2019, there was some language that first came through about luxury tax and specifically about aviation. We initially consulted with government back then, and then it went away. But this most recent sort of resurgence of it is the next component that we've needed to address. We have reached out. I think all of the pressures as it relates to COVID, as our colleagues from tourism in Quebec have indicated, the focus around COVID and building a plan that gets people moving again safely has been critical. But to date, there haven't been any sort of substantive discussions with respect to budget. We understand there's expected to be a backgrounder on this luxury tax, but there's too many questions in the air. And again, it goes back to that $15 million of potential revenue compared against the cost to the Canadian economy and the jobs across the country is frankly too much to bear.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. To Dr. Ahmed, you mentioned that India and China are the two countries that Canada procures most of the critical drugs from. Have other developed countries experienced similar shortages? Because I would have assumed they would also be accessing them from the same countries.
They did. So in particular, countries that are following and actually recording these kinds of shortages, such as Germany and France, experienced a 60% increase in shortages over the first few months of the pandemic. And so in fact, our group at the U of T found about 3 different kinds of responses amongst high income countries. In Europe, they have enough capacity that they actually were able to make critical drugs domestically. The US kind of did something similar, but they actually activated their Defense Production Act. So it mandated that everything really had to be made in the US, and they would sort of not really take over factories, but be able to use spare capacity in factories. And that's what they've done for their vaccines as well. We're challenged in Canada because we really only have one plant that could make injectables, and it's an older plant that doesn't make all the injectables. And we're also challenged in that really the choke point, I'd say, in the global supply chain is that 70% of the precursors come from China. India probably makes about 20 to 30%. So we have more diversity when it comes to the actual drugs, but the precursors themselves, that's been quite a challenge for a lot of people. And
so did we not see this coming? You would assume that federal government would at some point in time evaluate and assess its ability to respond to a pandemic or perhaps some other health-related events. Did we not see this coming?
Yeah, and we've had many warning signs. So it's been going on for over a decade. In 2012, there actually was a fire in the one plant in the country that we have that makes the injectables, and that caused massive shortages at that point. And there was a similar kind of inquiry, and other doctors spoke about having policies in place. But it just seems to be an intractable problem that hopefully now we can actually put in place the pieces that'll solve it going forward. Because it just keeps happening over and over again. And I don't know.
By the way, I just wanted to express my appreciation for the shout out to Mr. O'Toole's support of CANZUC. I'd be interested to hear from you how CANZUC could contribute to a more global approach to this kind of a problem.
Oh, for sure. I think it's an interesting proposal that I think could really increase harmonization of regulations, because that's a huge cost for a lot of generic drug companies, is getting multiple regulatory barriers and paperwork and red tape and stuff. Crossing that can be quite a cost.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. That's it, Ed?
Yep.
Okay, then we'll go to Mr. McLeod. Following Mr. McLeod, we have an opening for the Conservatives if they want a question. Just raise your hand and I'll pick you up. Mr. McLeod.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the presenters today. My question is to Startup Canada, Natasha Hope Morano. Here in the Northwest Territories, we've had a number of small local businesses successfully pivot to e-commerce during the pandemic. We had a coffee company that started marketing online, another restaurant that started selling their product, some of their salad dressing. However, one of the biggest hurdles for northern businesses to expand further in that field or in that area is the reliability and the affordability of high-speed internet. So I wanted to ask you if you could talk to us about how important it is that the government of Canada continue to bring forward measures like the additional $1 billion for the Universal Broadband Fund in this budget in order to close the digital divide for many people, including the northern entrepreneurs.
Absolutely. Thank you so very much for the question. I think our CEO, Kayla Isabel, had the opportunity to meet you a few years ago, pre-pandemic, in one of our Startup Canada global programming stops. So it's nice to see you again. I think you raised a very great point, and that is any additional investment in support for entrepreneurs is a good one. So pleased to see that there is an acknowledgement that there needs to be better support for rural and remote entrepreneurs, and connectivity of certainly being a big one. Startup Canada has an important partnership with an organization called Rule on Purpose. And that partnership supports us in our advocacy efforts and supports the ecosystem and helping us better understand where the pain points are in perhaps some of the more northern and rural locations. I think that when the government looks to this digital adoption piece, the huge investment in getting companies online and creating a robust network of entrepreneur organizations that are digitally competent and digitally sound, there needs to be acknowledgement and there needs to be better consultations with the entrepreneurs that are in those locations where it's not as easy as having a conversation like this remotely. To connect with their customers or with their stakeholders or wherever it may be. So while I think it's a great investment, I think that additional support is certainly needed if we want to be able to create a true entrepreneurial, robust ecosystem that removes as many hurdles as possible for entrepreneurs to be successful.
My next question is to the Quebec Tourism Organization. I didn't get the person's name, Mr. Chairman.
There's two of them, Mr. Paquette or Mr. Ryan. Go ahead.
Okay, I'll just put the question out and whoever wants to answer. The NMT has a very well-established and well-renowned tourism sector that makes up a very big part, a significant portion of our economy. We've had probably tighter restrictions in the north to limit travel to and from our territories, from outside of the country, but also from other parts of the other regions of Canada. And with the budget's announcement of $1 billion in support for tourism and events sector, including the $500 million to the regional development agencies for tourism businesses, and $100 million more for Destination Canada, do either of you think and anticipate this funding will help your membership through the remainder of the pandemic and help prepare for the eventual reopening of our regions to tourists?
Mr. Paquette or Mr. Ryan?
Well, of course, oui, je vais répondre en français.
Yes, I'll give my answer in French. Now, as we said, one can't ignore what was announced in the budget. That's $1 billion, $500 million for the regional development offices. These are significant amounts, but we don't know exactly how they'll be broken down. We'll get that information sooner or later. It's on a project-by-project basis for the development of projects from one across regions in Canada. In and of itself, it's good news. However, businesses, as I said earlier, are basically on their knees, and they've been just scraping by on a fraction of their normal revenue. They're just trying to get by and survive until revenue streams come back to normal. And that's the current state of mind. That's why we're calling for the extension of the Qs and the CERS, which covers a part of the overheads. It's a true lifeline. These are the two programs that enabled the tourism sector and its businesses to weather the storm. Now, once these businesses do weather the storm, and these are what the businesses are telling us, it's all well and good to have the desire to reinvent oneself, to want to develop new products and new things. But right now, it's just about getting through the crisis, taking advantage of the support programs, and then thinking about redeveloping. And Jean-Michel, would you like to add something? Well, I don't want to repeat what's already been said, but we just need to get through this part of the crisis to be able to bounce back thereafter. Now, the amounts of money for Destination Canada are welcome, but we're talking about, being able at the end of the day to bounce back. These are private companies in many cases. Some are organizations. If we really want to reinvest in our product and our infrastructure, well, we need to have minimum amounts of money earmarked, and we also need to be eligible to get access to future programs. So if we can't get access to that funding, we just won't be able to take part in the reopening. And that's kind of the sense that businesses have right at this time.
Before I go that's time, Michael. Before I go to Mr. Falk, just on that question on the wage subsidy, how critical? What is the percentage that you're looking at in terms of subsidy? Is it comparable to what was in place? And secondly, how critical is the timing of that to do your planning? Whoever wants to answer, Mr. Ryan or Mr. Bucket.
Les paramètres sont effectivement les mêmes.
Well, the parameters are the same as currently, or at least that's what we're calling for. Our proposal is that the current scope is maintained at 75%. Now, as far as how long it will last for, well, as long as we need the programs, as long as the sector isn't at the other end of the crisis. Now, you're only eligible if you have a loss in income. But perhaps we need an exit strategy for these programs in due course. Well, if I may just chime in, we're talking about 2022. We're talking about, of course, reopening the borders, but with the reopening of the borders, it'll take some time to bring back international tourists to Canada and Quebec. We're also in fear of an exodus of Canadians abroad. So we might end up in a kind of a vacuum at some point that'll be difficult to deal with. And that's why we've alluded to early 2022. We hope and we want the programs to be extended at least until 2022 so that we can get through this crisis.
Okay, thank you both. We'll go to Mr. Falk, followed by Ms. Damoff. Ted?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. And do I have a couple questions or what do we got?
Yeah, you got 5 minutes, Ted.
Oh, okay, very good. Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, back to Ms. Gervais and Mr. Norelco. You know, if I go buy a pickup truck for $60,000, I get a really nice functional truck. If I spend $95,000, I get an awesome truck. It's at the other end of the spectrum of trucks and capabilities. Last year, I had the opportunity to do some wake surfing, which I'd never done before. I was familiar with $80,000, $90,000 wakeboard boats and ski boats, but my friend bought a $200,000 wakeboard, and I did some wake surfing. It's awesome. If you've never done it, you should try it. It's an obvious, but that isn't even considered a luxury under this new proposed tax. Can you give me any indication as to, in the aviation industry, what might be considered a luxury? At what price point?
Well, thank you for the question. That's a very difficult question to answer because it really depends what you're using the aircraft for. Most aircraft serve a purpose. They serve a business. Like I was mentioning, they either serve for flight training or they bring goods to northern and remote communities. So to just say that an aircraft that has, say, 25 seats that is worth $2.5 million is a luxury is false, because it really depends on how it's registered, what its purpose is, what its certificate of registration says, whether or not it's for hire or so there's still a lot in this proposed tax that hasn't been thought out. And I know that it did say that, more information was going to follow. So I certainly hope that before they come up with this information, that they actually consult with industry so that they can determine what it is that they're trying to get at and what it is they're actually trying to tax, so that they don't actually penalize, a portion of Canada's economy.
Thank you. And I think that's the answer I was wondering about. I think when it comes to boats and when it comes to automobiles, most of us have a pretty clear picture of what luxury is. But in the airplane business, in the aviation community, $100,000, that's kind of entry level for a 30, 40-year-old airplane. I don't see that as much of a luxury. So thank you for answering that. Dr. Ahmed, thank you for your testimony on behalf of the Critical Drug Coalition and for the work that you do. hindsight is a wonderful thing. And you mentioned in one of your answers, you talked about ventilators. And can you tell me how many ventilators are in use in Canada right now?
I would have to look that up.
Okay, that's fair. But is in response to COVID and treating patients in ICU, is ventilation a common practice?
It certainly is. And I would say that at the beginning of the pandemic, we were ventilating more. And as we have learned how to deal with COVID-19 and in particular use some of the therapeutics that have come up, there's all sorts of new medicines that we found are helpful. We have been ventilating less. Now, ventilators were actually, I think, one of the more success stories because we actually had some, I think, automobile factories and stuff where we were able to retool and actually make ventilators. And thankfully, due to non-pharmaceutical intervention, so these would be things like masking and social distancing, we were actually able to really prevent a crisis from erupting in our ICUs. I will say that the major thing is that the reason we cancel ORs is to be able to have excess ventilators available.
Okay, and of all the drug regimes that you're using to treat COVID, which ones have you found to be most effective?
Yeah, so we've actually had some really good studies done in the UK to answer this question. There's a generic steroid, dexamethasone, that is being routinely used. And then there's a newer medicine. It's a biologic medicine. It's quite expensive, tocilizumab. And I won't. Took me a while to learn how to say it. And it's quite expensive. It's a newer biologic agent. There's been shortages of it because it's really not made in Canada. Hopefully, we can kind of get around to making that here as well at some point.
Okay. There's one other fairly common drug that some researchers have been promoting and touting is ivermectin. Do you have an opinion on that at all?
It hasn't really been shown to be beneficial in the research that I've seen so far. So mainly based on the trials out of the UK, where because of the NHS, they were actually able to do really cool studies where you just had hundreds of thousands of patients enrolled in different trials. And that's the best evidence that we have to know that dexamethasone and tocilizumab are what really work for people.
Okay. Thank you very much, Doctor.
Thank you. Thank you all. Turning then to Ms. Damoff. Pam.
Thanks a lot, Chair, and it's such a pleasure to join this committee. I can't begin to tell you. My question is for the Foundation for Black Communities. Actually, there's two questions in here. There was $100 million in the budget for the Canadian community initiatives. Basically, it's funding for capacity building. And I know reading your report, you mentioned capacity building as being something that Black-led organizations don't have when it comes to applying for grants. So I'm just wondering if you think that that's enough funding and if it will help. And then the second part of my question, since the pandemic began, we've sent a lot of funding through to community foundations, and then they've dispersed the funding through grants. Right now, they're opening up applications for the Healthy Communities Initiative to transform public places. So if you're a registered charity or you're a nonprofit residents association, you can apply. I'm wondering if you think that when we give funding like that to the community foundations, if a percentage of that funding should be earmarked for Black-led organizations.
Thank you for that question. Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
So I'll answer it in two ways. We absolutely believe there should be an equity benchmark within the philanthropic sector when it comes to grant making. I mentioned earlier that there is about $7 billion a year in grant making throughout foundations, corporate and community and private foundations in this country. That alone would, if we apply the 3.5% of which is the Black Canadian population to date, that would account for about $250 million a year in spending. So I think that gives you a bit of perspective around what $100 million for the supporting Black communities actually means, as well as the disbursement quota that I mentioned earlier with the $200 million philanthropic endowment. I say that to say we certainly could use a greater level of investment. For the supporting Black communities, that $100 million, member, as you know, is for 1 year. The question is, what happens moving forward because it's a longitudinal investment that we need to make so that we can really start moving the needle on these disparities that I've mentioned earlier, whether it's housing, food insecurity, and so much more.
But I guess what I'm asking is, like, there's the Philanthropic Endowment Fund, which has the 200 million. But when we're providing funding through to the community foundation, should we be saying that 3.5% of your funding needs to go to, and actually putting that into, it may not, across the board, it may be that in some communities it's 10% and in other ones it's 2%, right? But across the board that needs to, because I just find if that isn't there, it's too easy not to fund it. So I'm just wondering your thoughts on that.
Thank you. So sorry that I wasn't as clear. I was agreeing with you that there should be an equity benchmark.
Okay.
But I don't know that it should be 3.5%. I think to your point, we need to benchmark it to the actual the inequity, right? So thinking about, as you mentioned, maybe it's 10% in some regions, maybe it's 20% in others. And I think that one of the things is that there's a lack of data to really pinpoint where different communities are along this scale. And I think that's what makes it hard for folks to wrap their head around what the benchmark should be. But I absolutely do agree with you that if we're giving dollars to any community, for instance, the 400 million that's going to go to stabilize the social service sector, which is something that the Imagine Canada and community foundations are part of, we absolutely believe that there should be a equity benchmark, not only for Black communities, but Indigenous, for women, and so forth.
Yeah, because also the capacity building pieces, you'll never get to that equity benchmark if the organizations don't have the capacity to apply. And I often hear, well, we didn't get enough applications. And then I talk to organizations and they said, have you looked at the application form? We're trying to do the good work in the community. We don't have time to, or the knowledge to be able to fill that out. So thank you for that. And I have about 45 seconds left, just quickly to Startup Canada. I know the women's entrepreneurship strategy has been so successful in my riding. How important it is within that type of funding for startups is it to have, just as I was talking about, these equity benchmarks for women-led business, Black-led businesses, Indigenous-led businesses?
Absolutely. And thank you so very much for the question. I think it's incredibly important and we need to see that long term. That's the big piece. Similarly, with the procurement diversification, really happy to see that there is additional support for underrepresented groups. And I think that, as we're going to look to our great rebuild and we look to the role that entrepreneurs play in creating and stimulating, a very sound, strong Canadian economy, we need to be as inclusive as possible and make sure that all voices, all entrepreneur voices are included in high-level policies that are going to be implemented.
Thank you.
Just a quick supplementary to you, Ms. Morano, before we close. It was interesting wording. I thought you used the wording many times, pain points. What do you mean by that? Is it a lack of investment? Is it regulation? Is it labor? Is it skills training? What do you mean by that?
Thank you so very much, Chair. It's absolutely everything. Particularly with reference to the notes in my speech, I'm talking mainly about the early stage ideation, startup phase entrepreneurs, where they don't even know what an accelerator or an incubator is. They don't know where to go for support. They don't know what's available to them. 56% of our respondents from our most recent census are asking for better advisory and mentorship support and a mechanism in place where all of the information that's out there can be consolidated. So it's super easy, it's super accessible, and it's an efficient mechanism to be able to get funding that's available both through the private and public sector into the hands of the entrepreneurs that so desperately need it.
Well, related to Pam's question on applications, what do you make of federal government applications? I know volunteers that it takes them pretty near 20 hours to fill them out. They're so complicated when a 2-page application would do. What's your thoughts on that?
Great question, Mr. Chair, and thank you so very much. I'll answer the question in 2 pieces. If the entrepreneurs even know that there are government grants to be, tapped into, that's the first part. There's the access question. They don't know that there are mechanisms in place for additional support. And then it's navigating the myriad of different government programs. I had a conversation most recently with Minister Murray's office. It's not a simple process to be able to fill out an application form. And it's really about, I think, as we look to better support entrepreneurs, it's simplifying everything. And I think that's where Startup Canada can play a really important important role is creating the tools, resources, and frameworks so entrepreneurs know what specific resources are available for them depending upon where they are in their entrepreneurship journey.
Okay, with that, I want to, on behalf of committee, thank all the witnesses who appeared today. This is our final hearing on Bill C-30 before we turn to clause by clause. We've heard from a lot of witnesses, a lot of diverse witnesses every day. Thank you for taking the time, some of you on very short notice, to appear, put together your presentation, and answer our questions. With that, meeting adjourned. All the best.
Thank you very much.